Hello,
Yes,
Estella.
so we are live. Estella's gone up, but you can go on.
Okay, then. Good evening, everyone. Catholic Campus Live. A good evening to you all. Hope you're all well. And you're welcome to our weekly show where we try to get in touch with you and share a few things on the Catholic faith, try to bring some enlightenment on so many questions about our faith. We shall be sharing on a very interesting topic today, and I would like to get right into it right away. And today we are looking at IVF. IVF, is it illicit? And what's the alternative? I'll be joined by Estella along the way. She was with us, but left us for a bit. And I think just a network issue, but she should be right back on. So we're looking at IVF. What is IVF? So IVF in full, it's in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization. Now, in vitro refers to a process that takes place outside the body of a living organism. So if we combine that with fertilization, which we know is a process by which an egg is fertilized. In this case, we are looking at humans, and we are looking at IVF as a fertilization process for human beings. So it's a process by which the lady's eggs or the ova are fertilized by a man's sperm, but this is done outside the body. That's where in vitro fertilization comes about. So what exactly goes on in this process? So it's usually something that couples opt for when they're trying to get a child, but they've failed. This can be brought about by various reasons. So they try to opt for a place whereby they get some assistance in courts to help them manage to get a child. So what actually happens here is, I can say it's a five-step process. And the first step is stimulation or superovulation. So here, the lady is given stimulants to increase her egg production or overproduction. We know that at least a lady has one ova produced every month. But during this process, they try to give her stimulants such that they can produce more ova at this time. So what happens is that she's given stimulants such that she can produce more ova during this time. Then after this process, there's the retrieval of these eggs. Then they are retrieved through a surgical process. The eggs are retrieved and then placed in a dish, in the laboratory, what you'd call a laboratory dish. And then now the sperms are brought, collected from a man, and then injected and fertilized the eggs in a dish. Then this is placed into, we call a refrigerator, and kept for about 2 to 3 days. And then when the embryo is formed, is then transferred back into the woman's uterus. So basically, that's a rough idea of what goes on in the IVF. So what does IVF solve? Why do people opt for IVF? Like we said from the beginning, when people have tried, ideally, when people try to have a child and sometimes they fail to, they opt for any way that they can be able to get a child. And that is one of the reasons, actually the main reason why people opt for IVF. But what is the downside? There are very many risks that come up with IVF. One of them is multiple childbirth. It's more of a try and error process. So the more let's say, you try to increase your chance of success. So usually more than one egg is fertilized and implanted into the uterus, and such that you have a higher chance of getting conception. And the challenge that comes with this is that 2 or 3, or at times even more, of these embryos that are fertilized are placed into a woman's uterus, and she can end up having 4 or 5 children. I think if you can, you could have heard of the Octomom who had 8 children. It happened as a result of IVF. And that can be challenging to have all those children, first of all, to grow up to term and be delivered safely is a big challenge on its own, amidst other challenges. Then there's a high chance of miscarriages. Studies put it to about, you have a 25% higher chance of having a miscarriage when you opt for IVF. Then low birth weight for the children. There's also a high chance of ectopic pregnancies. This is whereby the implantation occurs outside the uterus, and the chances of survival for the child is 0. So the child dies. And studies are placing this to about 2 to 5% of all pregnancies that result from IVF end up being ectopic pregnancies, and the child is lost. It's also quite a very expensive process. Outside Uganda, in the US, for example, it costs about $15,000 to have this process. And converting that quickly to Ugandan money, that's about 50 million. And I think we can all agree that's quite steep price to pay. In Uganda, we are also advancing in the field. And I think the new Mulago Maternity Hospital offers such services. And even there, regardless that it's a government facility, government aided, and probably the cheapest you'll find it is at about 15 million. And still, given the average Uganda, this is a lot of money to pay. Most especially that the chance of success is about only 25% for each time that you go in. So regardless of how much is actually being spent, the chances of actually reaching to pregnancy are still quite low. If we can go forward and look a little bit about now, what does the church teach on such matters? We have already seen there's quite a number of challenges that one may undergo, one may have if you're opting for this process. But let's try and look at what does the Catholic Church teach on such matters, and what has been their say. We do know that on matters faith and morals, the church is custodian and has the authority to teach. That is what was given to her by Christ. And that mandate it holds and does its very best to distribute this knowledge to all the faithful and the entire world. Estella, is Estella back on? Hello, Estella? I think she'll catch her on the way. So what does the church talk about such matters?
Hi, Ronald.
Oh, good to have you back.
I'm sorry for that glitch.
It's okay.
But
I had just run
now.
through a brief process of what IVF is and what challenges it has as a process, what can be undergone, and what it seeks to solve. And now we are trying to look at church teaching on IVF and the related matters. I don't know if you'd love to submit anything before we can go ahead, and then you can also lead the way in that discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I listened into the tail end of your discussion on what IVF is and the challenges that are posed by IVF. I'm not sure though. Okay, I think you were talking about the challenges inherent in the IVF process. Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
Yes, that's right.
there are also the challenges that raise moral issues, but
True.
maybe I guess we shall discuss them a little later.
Okay, good.
So I think we can go to the next part about what does the church teach in relation to IVF. Yeah.
True.
And I'll start off by saying that as a couple of people have stated before, the church teaching on IVF is probably one of the hardest to take, because IVF seems like it is enabling you to do something good, something in line with
Something good. True.
what God is asking of us. Yeah. So before we go very far, the summary of the teaching is that IVF is wrong. Yes.
Okay.
And
In brief.
in brief, yeah.
Yes.
And we shall see the reasons as we
Let's remove on. Surely.
go on in the discussion. But to throw a light on how confusing this can be, I think we'll first go back to Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 to 28.
Okay.
Yeah. I will read it verbatim. It says, "And God created man to his own image. To the image of God created them. And God blessed them, saying, Increase and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the air, and all living creatures that move upon the earth." Now, you see, this is 128 is that God blessed them. Yeah, saying increase and multiply. So, as you have mentioned, IVF enables couples who are infertile to conceive, to increase and multiply. Yeah. So, if the church is pro-life and I am creating life,
and indeed the church is pro-life,
why is IVF wrong? Yeah, I think that's where the discussion gets very interesting. So as I have summarized, the church teaching is that IVF is wrong, and it has reasons. Yeah, the specific, for you to get proper insight into the church's mind on this topic, you need to read Donum Vitae. And in Donum Vitae, they give reasons, basically 3 in summary. Yeah. One is that the process of IVF, as Ronald has explained it, severs the essential connection between the conjugal act and procreation. I think Ronald has ably mentioned that procreation is a reserve of marriage. It's a result of the marital act. It is one of the 2 purposes of the embedded in the marital act. The 2 purposes are the marital act or the conjugal act is unitive and procreative. Yes. So IVF enables couples to procreate without the marital act, which is a problem. We shall go into it further. Then there's also the possibility of IVF being used. Remember, in Genesis 1:27, we've read that he created them male and female. Yes. But
True.
IVF enables same-sex couples to have children. It enables, single parents to have children, and so children can be had outside of the marital context. Yeah. And as we shall see in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it says that children have a right to be born, of a marital act in the marital context. Yes. And the other thing is that the destruction of human embryos that is involved in the IVF process. So in the IVF process, at a certain point, at various stages, there'll be destruction of the embryos. They'll be placed in a culture context for them to mature, and while they are there, they'll keep doing tests. They'll keep doing genetic tests to eliminate those that are not viable, and then eventually they might come up with multiple embryos, but probably the person who's procuring the IVF process does not want to have all those children at the same time. So some might be destroyed at that point. Others are going to be stored, cryopreserved, that is in cold storage, frozen. And with time, different countries where this is really prevalent have set up different laws, and they have different timelines after which these embryos have to be destroyed. So there's a lot of destruction. There are also circumstances where I was reading, for example, there's a lady, she had a couple of embryos frozen. I think she had 3 children or 1. And then if she wanted to have more, but then they told her that she could not actually carry the babies to term, like she could not carry a pregnancy anymore. So the embryos that had been created would have to be destroyed. And so this destruction of human embryos is a concern for the church, because the church believes that life begins at conception. Yes. And and embryos are formed, in the conception process. So that is a life. That embryo has a soul, and so to destroy it is tantamount to the abortion.
Murder.
That yes, it is murder because abortion is murder.
Yeah.
So it is murder, and all these are concerns for the church.
True.
Ronald, I think you can add something.
Okay, if I can take on from there. I think you spoke about Donam Vijay. I think it was could have missed out. This is an instruction that was issued by the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith. That was in 1983, and I think they have hence had
it was 1987.
Not a revision. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
They had a supplement again from the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith that was in 2008 called Dignitas Personae, the dignity of the human life. And the church is coming out very strongly on these matters. And why so? Because if we read from the Catechism, Numbers 2373 up to 2379, and it tells you that the church knows that couples greatly suffer. Couples that are found to be sterile, they greatly suffer. And they actually encourage any research that can be done to reduce the cases of infertility or to aid such couples to go ahead surely and help where they can. But this must only be done within God's design and God's will. From Humanity, now this was an encyclical written by Pope Paul VI, where it tells you that the transmission of human life is a most serious role, a very serious role, in which married people collaborate freely with God to bring life. So one, married people, and again, in collaboration with God. When we end up looking at processes like IVF, and that's where the church comes in very strongly, we are eliminating the role of God in all this. And we are also told that, children are a gift from God. Children have a right to be the fruit of conjugal love of their parents. So the way one person actually summarized it, the children have a right to be born in love and through love, in the love of their parents and through the love-making act of their parents. And that right is not one that we can deny to these children. Also, couples have a right to become parents only through their spouses. Now, another aspect of IVF is that there is donation in some cases. For example, the sperm of the man can be donated by, okay, in the context, let's assume that this is actually a married couple. So you can have the sperms being donated by someone that is not the husband, or the ova being donated by someone who is not the wife. And that could as well tantamount to adultery, having child elsewhere. But you're denying a right to one of the spouses to become a parent only by the other spouse. There's also a case of surrogate mothers, whereby once the egg from the mother is obtained and the sperm brought together, fertilized, it's then implanted in a woman that is not the biological mother of the child, and she carries the pregnancy for 9 months, which is quite an unfortunate scenario, because again, the child has a right to be born and carried by their biological parents. If we go ahead to continue to look at why the church is stressing that this is wrong, there's so many reasons, and you mentioned a good number of them. But the list is endless. If we look at, for example, the way sperm is obtained, sperm is obtained most commonly through masturbation. And we already know the challenges. First of all, it's already a sin, but the challenges that come with masturbation. There's also a very critical point of gene manipulation. So we have, right now, you can study the genes of the embryos and say, okay, now we would want our child to be like this. Oh no, he should be tall. So you can tamper with the genes. So now we're actually playing God and saying, no, I think my child should have this color of eyes, this height, or what. So remove this, add this. So we are going into manufacturing children in the simplest term. And that's reducing the dignity, reducing children to products. I want, like the way you say, I want a shirt that is blue. No, this one is too big. Slim it down for me. This is what we're going ahead to do to children. And this is very unacceptable. You did mention the case of allowing for children to be born outside marriage. So now we have same-sex couples, which are, for example, if they are both men, they have their sperm fertilizing an ova, they get a surrogate, and they have a child. Not only is this wrong to them themselves, but to the child, who is going to grow up in a home that lacks a parental figure, either a mother or a father. And then you talked about the challenge that comes with multiple births. So you're finding that there's a challenge whereby you have 3 to 4 children, because in a bid to ensure that conception occurs, because we already say that you have about a 25% chance. So in order to have a higher chance of conception, more embryos are placed, usually more than one is placed into the woman. And what happens if, in some cases, all of them actually get to grow into children? What happens is that in simple terms, the child is aborted. They say that, you have about 4 children. And the mother, like, I don't think I can handle that. And they say, okay, let's see which ones we can remove. And the process is it's actually a very sad process. What actually happens is that they get an injection and they inject potassium chloride into the hearts of these children. In the simplest term, it's cold-blooded murder. We are aborting these children. We are killing these children. And the church is saying, no, this cannot be done this way. Back to you, Stella.
Yes, thank you very much. Also say besides issues that cause theological turmoil, when you look at you know the social life, when you look at the legal environment, the issues that have been caused by IVF, yeah, you can really see that it's really for our own good that the church advises us or actually condemns the use of IVF. For example, there are so many cases of embryos suing their parents for their right to life. You also have instances, for example, in Europe, for you if you've frozen embryos and then you want to use them, you have to have consent of both the parties to the both the persons who donated to the formation of the embryo. And then you'll find instances where one of the parties is ready to have the embryos implanted and the other is not. And then you'll have a legal battle as a result. And to make it worse, there are timelines to work within because the embryos in Europe, at least, they cannot be frozen for forever. They'll have to be destroyed at a certain point. So, you know, you're working against those timelines. And, you know, all that drama, there are people who are adopting embryos. So you'll find, yes, embryos have been adopted and these embryos are now being fertilized, but these embryos are like 12 years. And now, I mean, the child is being born 12 years later. And then, of course, research is still going on. I don't know if people are actually actively researching the effects of these processes on these children, especially those who have been frozen for long before fertilization. Like, what happens? What is the effect of this? Yeah. So there are all those issues. How do the children react when they find out that they were made in laboratories? I mean, you know, through that artificial process. What effect does that have on what psychological effect does that have when they find out? You know, there are so many unnecessary issues that, you know, are coming out of this process. And so the reasons why IVF is not allowed by the church are numerous. And on top of what the church tells us, I think we can also see for ourselves that there is a problem with this technology. Case. Yeah, and I think it's for people who who believe in God for, Catholics for whom God comes first. I think it's even interesting when you look at the reasoning of Robert Edwards, one of the researchers who came up with this process. Yeah. He says he wanted to find out exactly who was in charge, whether it was God or whether it was scientists. And his conclusion was that it's the scientists who are in charge of this process. In other words, his thinking is that, you can totally eliminate God if he's delaying you, or if he's not a scientist, we shall sort you out. But the raw material and everything that was created by God. God is the author of life. So to go ahead and use IVF, I think for me mirrors the people who are trying to build the Tower of Babel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, let us be humble and accept. But of course, I guess it's easy to speak theoretically about this, but I think one of the biggest challenges comes from the emotional pain and turmoil that is faced by parents who, by people who are struggling with infertility or sterility. It's really hard for them to see the point that IVF is actually wrong. And when the Bible says that God blessed them to multiply and increase, it can really feel like a curse or a divine punishment. Yeah. So one of the important things is to help people understand that it is not a curse, it is not a punishment. Yeah. Children are gifts. Yeah. I think it's easy for us to say God gives and God takes for other things, but it's the same attitude we should try and cultivate. When you understand that children are gifts, God is the author of life. Yeah. And then when you remember that he has a plan for your life, and probably he wants to use you in ways that you would in ways that you can never imagine, because at the end of the day, what are we created for? We are created to worship God. Yeah. And I think worship includes an element of sacrifice, and if we truly want to worship God, we need to worship him following his lead. Yes. And so if he has a different plan for this married couple other than having children of their own, probably he wants them to be open to receive, to be available for so many other people who need parenting in so many different ways. Not necessarily children, it could be children, yes. But then it could be youth, it could be the church could need some extra help, which you are facilitated to do, to render by this fact. Or God has a perfect plan for you, and I think it is just important to walk the journey with him. Of course, that does not mean that, okay, when you realize you're infertile or sterile, don't even talk to God about it. You can go to God. Yeah, go to God about it, and he will show you. Besides, you should be consoled by the fact that there are the many people in the Bible, yeah, who struggled with this issue. Yeah. You have Abraham and Sarah, you have Elizabeth, you have Joachim and Anne, the parents of Our Lady. You have Hannah, the mother of Samuel. You have Rebecca, the wife of Isaac. You have all these people who struggled with infertility to look up to, and you can see that for all of them, the children that they had eventually were very, very special children. So go to God with the issue, because there is nothing that human beings can do to fill that void. Yeah. And because we have a natural inclination, a natural yearning to want to be parents, to participate in the procreation of children. But we should remember that we want to participate in the procreation of children, and procreation entails working with God. Yes. So I do not know if I can say anything convincing, but
truly we can only try. We can only try.
Yes.
It's really a one-on-one experience.
Yes.
To offer that comfort and to encourage that trust. Like St. Paul says, different parts, we are all one body, different parts. If we are not called to serve the Lord and to serve the church in one way, then we should try to open the rest of the talents that we have to try and serve in another, to be open that in one way or another we are contributing to the body of Christ, which we all are part of. We may not all do the same thing, we may not all serve in the same way, but our contribution, regardless how it comes, is still very valid. So you might not be able to have children of your own, but that could be a calling to minister in very many different ways in the church and in our daily lives.
Yeah, and I think it's at this point that we need to comment on how God sees these children and the parents who have participated in this process. It's emphasized in Donum Vitae as well that God, through His goodness, provides mercy. Yeah, so God does not hate you, the person who has been pushed to procure a child through this process, but He does not like the process. He does not approve of it. Yes, and for the children who are born of that process, God has, because all these children, they have souls, they are loved by God, and yes, they're still gifts. Yes, it's just that, okay, we sort of yanked them out of His hand, but they're still gifts, and he loves these children. Being born through this process does not mean that they do not have a chance at heaven. They have a chance just like any other person born through the natural process. So I think it's just important to make it clear that God does not love the parents of these children any less, neither does He love these children any less. But still, this process is not, it's not what God envisaged, or it is not what God designed for procreation. So it is still wrong. Yeah, but that does not mean run away from the church. No, you're not finished. There are so many sacraments. There's the sacrament of reconciliation. Please come back to the church and bring these children up in the church. Yeah, you're not excommunicated. I've not read it anywhere that you are excommunicated for participating in this process, but keep with the church, come back to the church, try and understand more, and ultimately pray, because this is one of the of those instances where you're going to have to discern with God Himself. Yeah.
Very true. As we try to wrap
Ronald,
up,
you were
yes, as we try to
saying
wrap up,
something?
yeah, I was saying, is the church indifferent to this suffering? Some people have the perception that church is anti-science, and that is not true. Church is pro-science only if it falls in line with the natural law. So does the church actually give us some alternatives? And yes, it does. So what does the church say is wrong? The church says that any treatment that substitutes or replaces the conjugal act is to be avoided. So the question is, does the treatment I'm opting for help the husband and the wife engage in the marital act, or does it substitute or replace the marital act? So the church has actually come up through a study that was done under the Pontifical Institute of Pope Paul VI, come up with what certain alternatives, and one of them is NAPRO technology. So NAPRO technology actually stands for Natural Procreative Technology. So it's a different approach, and for it, what it seeks to do is actually to do thorough study and try and find out the cause of infertility, and then deal with the cause of infertility. So it does not replace, however, it tries to assist the couple to ensure that they can have a child, but through the actual process. So NAPRO technology and any other technology that goes ahead to assist and not replace the, the marital act. And actually from studies that show that the use of NAPRO technology is actually up to 3-4 times more effective than IVF. Yeah, so the church is saying, wait, we are not saying if you are sterile, don't try out anything. No, there are actually ways that you can try to have a child that are within the means of the church. And NAPRO technology is one of them.
Yeah. And yes, not only is it permitted by the church, it is also cost effective. Yeah.
True.
And yeah.
Yes.
So
maybe just a little light on what
maybe
NAPRO.
okay, yeah, that's what I was going.
Yes. So what exactly is it? It's about studying the fertility and the cycles. So it's more of a problem based rather than try to find the solution outside. Try and look within, solve the actual problem. So try and study the fertility. So it's a process of studying the fertility cycles, and you're looking at what is the challenge. Is the man having a low sperm count? How can we boost the fertility? Then you look at the fertility cycles of the lady. Is it actually, when are the most fertile periods? Is there anything that is affecting her fertility? Is there anything that is hindering implantation? And then you look at what can be done. Some surgeries, some corrective surgeries can be opted for that will allow for conception to actually take place. So in a brief, it's more of try and study what is wrong rather than get a solution outside. Try and study what is affecting the fertility and deal with that instead of looking outside and not solving the actual problem.
Yeah, so indeed, it looks at finding out the underlying cause and dealing with that underlying cause in order to let the couple be able to conceive. But it should be noted that still, God decides at the end of the day. So it does not mean that when you use NAPRO technology, you automatically get pregnant. It works most of the time, but sometimes it doesn't. And well, it's really up to God. It's not a means of forcing God's hand. Yes. As we wrap up still, I think since we are talking about these issues from a Catholic point of view, I think it's important to mention some saints who can accompany you on this journey of trying to conceive. a child of your own. We have Our Lady, of course, and then we have Saint Joseph. Then we have Saint Rita of Cassia. We have Abraham and Sarah and Elizabeth and Saint Joachim and Saint Anne. We have Saint Gianna Beretta, who is a modern day saint, canonized in 2004, actually, who she was active and process. But yes, so she's there's so many. There's Saint Bridget. There is some people will go to Saint Jude. People go to Saint Anthony of the Child Jesus. There's so many saints in heaven who are ready and willing to intercede for us as we go through this process. So please never feel alone. Yes.
Very true.
Ronald.
Yes, as we began, we were talking about a hard teaching. Remember in John 60 verse 6, when Jesus talks about the teaching, and said, this is a very hard teaching. How can we conceive this? And indeed, this is right up there. This is right up there with one of the hard teachings. But what comes to mind are two quick other scenarios. What do we do in these cases? Remember in Luke chapter 17, verses 5 to 10, when again Christ gave a hard teaching, and what do the disciples do? They ask, Lord, please increase our faith. So I think it's what we ask for in this situation, that the Lord can be gracious and increase our faith. Then also St. Paul, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9, when he cries out to the Lord to give him a way out from his pain and his suffering, and he reminds him that my grace is sufficient. May we never forget this, that no matter what we are going through, no matter how the challenging situation could be, the grace of the Lord is sufficient, He's always with us, and we can always trust in Him, though we may not understand what may be going on at the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronald. Thank you very much, dear listeners and viewers, for sticking with us to the end of this program. I hope you've learned something, and indeed, may God increase our faith and be our comfort. Good night.
Good night.